Hello, this is Fan Electric Ghost. We have Drastic Park on.
Hey, how's it going? John Stokes
How you
here.
doing? Hi, John. Is this going to be you, or are you going to have another person on?
No. Chris is also joining. He's the bassist. Not sure where he is at. We were literally just talking to each other, and we literally just sent each other the link. So let's see
Okay.
how we go.
Well, yeah, I'll just give a little update, a little intro before he joins. This is Fan Electric Ghost, where we interview indie artists from around the world. Been doing it since 2018. So we have Drastic Park on the line. You guys are from what, Australia?
Yeah, Victoria, Australia, in Melbourne.
Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, while we wait for your bandmate to join, I'm an indie artist myself, and Anchor is actually part of Spotify. And we've been doing these interviews since 2018. And, we like to give indie artists a platform to talk about the music, which is really important in this day and age with the coronavirus, because a lot of touring has basically stopped for most of the bands I've talked to. They can't tour anymore, so they need to use social media to talk to people.
Yeah,
get their message out.
and that's exactly what we're doing. So just Chris is just having a few troubles getting in, so he's going to try another way. He can't seem to work it on his phone, so
cool.
I can take it from here.
Okay. Well, I like to go through the questions. We can ask him, where we get along. We'll get there. But when did you guys first get into music? What age?
So I mean, me personally, I can't remember, but as in probably just super early, as in enjoying listening to music. But as for getting into music, it probably wasn't until I was about 15 where I started wanting to play guitar. Until then, I was just kind of into keyboard. But then I started listening to bands like Green Day and Blink-182, and I just got into guitar. And actually, I wish it was on now because one of the inspirations was Chris, who's our bassist, but he was originally, well, he still is, but he's an acoustic guitarist. He's a great finger-picking acoustic guitarist. And he was one of my inspirations originally to want to start guitar. And that's actually kind of how me and him started playing music originally. We started when I was 15 and he was 18. And back then we were into emo music. So that was early 2000s. So yeah, there's a lot that came into it, but I think definitely what got me into music early on was kind of like a pop punk and punk sound, really.
Oh, so power pop. I was into a punk aesthetic. I don't know if you know bands like Husker Du or The Replacements. They're an American band, or Black Flag. Bands like that. But they were American punk bands. But
yeah, I've only heard of Black Flag.
Yeah. Husker Du had Bob Mould, Grant Hart. They were a Minneapolis punk band, and they did a power pop type punk. It was very raw, but it had melodies to it.
Yeah, which is cool. I'm a fan of all punk from raw to the poppier side of things. So
and Paul Westerberg and The Replacements, they had this kind of power poppy punk, kind of going back to Alex Chilton and Big Star. I don't know if you heard of them, but they were kind of a clone to the Beatles, but they had this kind of power pop sound. That was kind of Badfinger, if you know the Beatles and Badfinger and stuff like that. But yeah, I've always been into the punk aesthetic, from the Clash to the Ramones, because even though I'm a synth player, I kind of like that punk edge. It gives you a Trent Reznor sound if you're a synth player.
Yeah, I know.
A little more aggressive rather than being The Cure or being emo. You end up doing something that has more, power kind of gut to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The punk aesthetic is cool for keyboardists too.
Yeah.
I think Chris just joined. I think he's on. We have Chris on now?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. I'm just trying to make sure my audio doesn't echo too much with this because I haven't got headphones to suit my laptop. I had issues with the phone link, though. That was all.
Okay, that's cool. Well, you're on now with John, so that's cool. So we have Drastic Park, we have John, and we have Chris.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Chris, he was just asking about how we got into music, and I told the story of how we even started playing music. So, but yeah, I don't know if you want to ask that question to Chris again. He might have a different answer.
Yeah. I just asked John about how he got into music. So, what age and that's the first question I sent you guys. But
yeah, well, that's cool. We were both teenagers, and yeah, pretty much he would have told you the same story as I would tell anyway. But it was just inspiration from the same sort of music. We both fell in love with a band called Blink-182, and the rest is history. We sort of started making music together from there, and then we've been in about 5, 6 bands together over the years, and still making music now.
That's cool. And so, yeah, we've got some new questions about like what's going on with Corona, but we'll get to that later. One of the things we like to talk about is like, okay, what you started like liking music at a young age. When did you start working on your own music? Because what we always ask is like, there are people who are fans of music, they never become musicians, or musicians that become like studio musicians or classical musicians. They don't really write their own music. What made you feel that you wanted to write your own music?
Well, when I first started music, I probably learnt a few covers, but from the beginning I was writing. I had never actually had an interest in covers, and I still don't. I still just write my own songs. I can't tell you the amount of songs I've written since I started playing guitar. Like, it's always just been about that. And I don't know, I think, Chris, you're kind of similar, aren't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't be any different at all, really. I do an occasional cover here and there. I did my first cover in ages, a Machine Gun Kelly one that I haven't even put up yet. But apart from that, I probably haven't done a cover in 5 years or something. And the only reason I think I've done it is, because of all this coronavirus stuff. So being sort of trapped at home, trying to find some different things to do. But generally, just always made my own music. And I started, teaching myself guitar. I was inspired by my big brother for a bit there. And just always been making my own stuff, but always with John as well for what, I don't know, 12 or 13 years, maybe more.
I can't count.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always done that too. I was trained to be like a classically trained wind player. And then I got into keyboards because like a clarinet, you can't really write that much on a clarinet.
Not much, yeah.
Yeah.
You can try.
You can try, but I kind of used the idea of being a wind player to kind of bring like Coltrane and Miles Davis type stuff into the way I do my analog synths, because I'm a big analog synth guy. And I'm like one of these guys. I don't, I understand everybody's on these DAWs, on these digital audio workstations today, with all these soft synths and stuff. But like I said, I have a punk aesthetic. I like bands like Who's To Do, The Clash, Green Day, a lot of punk aesthetic, Nirvana. And so I felt like if I'm going to write music, I don't want to be grabbing, samples and pulling soft synths and using a DAW. I kind of do raw recording of analog and modular synths.
That's cool.
Which it has this kind of punk aesthetic to it, but then you want to write your own thing. You want to write your own music. I'm inspired by people when I bring that inspiration in. But yeah, I understand bands that I talk to. A lot of bands I talk to, they have that same idea. Because I'm talking to mostly indie musicians that want to have their own voice and their own aesthetic out there. So that's cool to see you guys doing that, because there's so many people today are using digital audio workstations, and soft synths and samples and clips, and you guys are doing it kind of like old school.
Yeah, for sure.
So when did you decide that you had a talent for doing it and you actually wanted to keep on going and actually form a band? Is this not your first band, right? For you guys, or is it?
With me and Chris have probably had about 4 bands together. I've probably had about 10. I don't think I ever really thought I had a knack for it until recently. I think I just like doing it. I don't think I ever really thought I was that good. And I think I just, with age, I've probably matured and gotten a bit better, definitely at singing, because I was never a good singer. I hate watching the old videos of myself, but definitely it's gotten better with time. I think it's only recently, especially when we got band coaching by Future Artist Development last year, when we kind of realized we might have something here with our sound and our writing. So I think that's when we actually only started to really build confidence for you last year, I think.
Yeah, it would only be in the last 6 months that we probably started to think, hey, this is kind of working more than it has in the past. Maybe we should take it a bit more seriously and invest a bit more time and money into things.
You got a little Amazon delivery.
It's actually an alarm to tell me I need to give my cat antibiotics because she just had surgery. She ate a corn cob.
I was going to say, Chris has been breaking a lot of social distancing recently, so I thought maybe he had a guess.
Oh, you got somebody coming over for.
I don't even have a doorbell. Yeah. I live in the country. There's no one for miles from me.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I'm under lockdown, but I'm in my home studio, so I'm good.
Oh, that's sick. That's all you need. That's all we've been doing. I've been living my life on my computer, just recording new stuff.
Yeah, I just been like taking my modular synth and taking the CV course in and out, and it's like keep on like, I'll clean slate, start over again.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that's cool that you guys recently you guys have felt like you're starting to gain traction, so that's really cool to have that happen. And so, like you said, your influence like Blink 182 and some other bands, like maybe dive a little deeper into some of your reference points of what people could maybe hear in your music.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that one mainly because I think I started the sound, and now kind of Chris and Jordan, we're kind of like they're continuing it from there. But I'm definitely very influenced by Blink 182. But another band is an Australian band called Violent Soho, which might as well give a little shout out to. I'm a really big fan of theirs. Definitely like all the earlier stuff, from like, Sum 41, Green Day, that it definitely where the raw punk sound started to get a little bit more pop, but still maintain that kind of like punk raspy feel about it. So that's definitely what I like. But then again, Chris would bring his own influences too. I don't know if you want to answer any more about that, Chris.
Yeah, probably Britney Spears. No, I don't know. Like for me, with this band, it was actually a bit different to normal. When me and John have been in bands in the past, we've had very sort of similar mindsets because we'd been already writing music and working on music building into those bands. But with this band, I was kind of a bit burnt out and not keen to really make any more music. I was like, nah, I've had enough of the music industry and the scene. It's just not working for me. But then John sort of came to me out of the blue and said, well, I've got this idea for a 3-piece. You only need one other member apart from us to be committed, so it's not going to take too much. And we should be able to pull some stuff together. And he already had a few songs written, and he sent me one of them, and I was like, holy crap, that's actually really bloody good. So I was like, yeah, I'll be part of the band then, I'll give it a go. And that's sort of, so for this first EP, a lot of the stuff was already in John's head, and he had all these ideas and these concepts. But in saying that, John is influenced by a lot of the same bands as me. So you would have your Blink 182s, your Green Day, or your punk rock, and then some light elements of pop punk in there too. So I think I would probably write in a similar way, and actually we are writing some stuff together at the moment that that's taking some more of my influence, and I'm probably a little bit heavier on the pop punk side than John. Like he would fall back to more of the punk rock, but myself, a bit more pop punk. So my sound would be drawn more from mid 2000s to probably early 2010s pop punk, whereas John's is probably early 2000s and back in the punk rock. So we're both still similar sort of eras and genres, but a little bit of variation in there.
That's interesting. So your name actually from your biography, it comes from like the Jurassic Park franchise, right? That's interesting.
Yeah.
What made you guys do that?
One day someone said Jurassic Park, and I thought I heard Drastic Park, and the rest is history. I literally just thought, oh my god, that sounds really cool. And that's my favorite movie, and I have been a massive fan of dinosaurs since I was a kid. So I just said to the guys, let's just call it Jurassic Park, and it's been probably our best decision so far because everyone loves it and it rolls off the tongue. And probably like the first time we got played on the radio, we got a shout out from Josh Muriel from Short Fast Loud. He had a bit of a laugh at the band name, and he was a big fan of that name. So we're glad we went with it. Yeah, but it has no meaning whatsoever.
Yeah. Some band names don't mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting though, but it's cool. So like you guys, you had been touring before the whole thing happened, or you haven't really toured with this band?
You know what? Me and Chris have never toured, and we were going to, but then Corona happened. So, mind you, we've played some ripper gigs before. We've supported bands like Anti-Skeptic, we were a big Australian band back in the day, and then Red Jumpsuit Apparatus, Hawthorne Heights. So we've played the gigs. We just haven't travelled beyond Victoria for it, and we were going to, but probably not for the foreseeable future. But that's okay.
So you guys, have you guys thought of the way in social media, like the Facebook Lives, and using Twitch to actually do maybe from like a home studio, like maybe unplugged or a small session like that? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so we're looking into the live part of it. I suppose the tough one is, since we are a band, it's a bit hard to, especially with Australian internet speeds, all do it at once. So what we've been doing is just doing individually. So I did one the other day where I just did an acoustic version of one of our harder songs, which did pretty well. But we're not super worried because we have always been really active on social media. I work in video production, so I'm always editing things. So even recently, we had a video go viral where it's funny we're talking about coronavirus and Green Day and all that stuff, because we did a cover of Wake Me Up When September Ends by Green Day, except called it Wake Me Up When Corona Ends. And we kind of replaced all the lyrics with a bit more of a comical outlook on it, edited something, and I think 50,000 views later, it did pretty well.
That's cool. So it's good that you're already like familiar with social media, because some bands, they're not in that situation. Yeah. I've talked to some, bands that were like live acts and they kind of lived on the road. And then they got to reconfigure and figure out how to do stuff.
Exactly. It's I guess we're lucky in that way, that we can still be active in this time in a way. So yeah.
So when we get into the genre, we've been talking, you're kind of like a post-punk, pop-punk, but how else would you describe somebody saying what genres are your band covers? Would you go deeper than that, or is that pretty much the description of the way
if you really wanted to get an idea of our sound, I know we've said Blink-182 a lot, but there's a particular album by Blink-182 that no one has ever really tried to emulate, and that's when they went through this darker pop punk sound, which was slowly verging onto emo, but it had all these really strange elements, almost gothic in a way, where they did that for one album and then they broke up, so it never really went anywhere. And I've always loved that album. I think one day I played a Blink cover gig and I learned some of those songs. I'm like, oh wow, I actually love this kind of playing. And when no one actually does it, it's hard to explain. It's kind of like guitar played entirely with octave chords, where there's always an open note playing to give it this drone.
Drone rock.
Yeah, so
I get that.
So it's a bit of a mix of that, but still having all those pop punk elements in there. So if you listen to the self-titled album by Blink-182, you'll start to get an idea of my direction for it.
That's interesting, because I used to be into like Echo and the Bunnymen, and they used to do some kind of drone stuff, and it was a little interesting. And then other bands like one of the first like post-punk bands was like Joy Division. And Joy Division's a big like inspiration. Yeah, they just had this kind of punk aesthetic, even though they started to use synths, and they started to be like the beginning of that new wave sound in like '79. Kind of starts with a band like Joy Division, and they became New Order. And then Depeche Mode was kind of inspired by them, but it's kind of the darker type of synth wave, new romantic. I've always been attracted to, and they always had kind of open droning, lines in those type of bands that were kind of interesting. So I kind of get where you're going. So when you record, do you go to a studio, or you do a home studio, or you use the DAW? How do you guys record?
It's kind of varied lately, hasn't it, John? So typically, actually, we started our very first recordings. We started from home. So my mum actually had this thing while we were teenagers called a Timberland, and it's like this small 2-channel interface, sort of like a built-in computer with Reaper hooked up to it. And we did our very first recordings through that from home, and we uploaded that to like it's called Triple J Unearthed in Australia. It's like a local sort of promote your own band sort of avenue. You put things up on there and you can share it right across social media. So we had that going from when we first started, essentially 12, 13 years ago. And we then started taking ourselves a little bit more seriously as the projects went on, and started moving into the recording studio side of things. And we've been across multiple studios with multiple projects, but we've kind of gone full circle now where we're back to recording from home again with with the COVID. So, and funnily enough, I've still got this little 2-channel interface that I'm recording with from home and it's still got this old version of Reaper that I'm running. And I sent some stuff to John in the last couple of days just to have a play around with. So yeah, it's just kind of gone full circle lately.
That's interesting. So you're still using kind of an old school method to record. You're not using like Pro Tools or any of that stuff, or Ableton Live, FL Studio. Using an older method, which is still, any method works. I mean, I started on a Tascam 4-track cassette machine.
That's
recording like taking like Yamaha DX7s and Roland D50s directly by the 1/4-inch line into a Tascam 4-tracker, and then taking that, and then from there I went to like a Zoom R24, which is a digital recorder, but it's not a DAW. It's a hardware Japanese recorder. And that actually use that rather than a DAW, because I like to capture analog synths, and I like to just kind of record stream of consciousness, kind of in this like just punch in, punch out. Don't do all this auto correction or on the grid. I just kind of do it by
nice
and just tracking, and it creates a different sound. If you. Because the thing I think one of the things I noticed about some of the people with the modern DAWs, it sounds perfect. Maybe it sounds too perfect. It sounds too antiseptic. It's like really clean, but it doesn't have character. In some cases, it's just so perfect, and the beats are so tight, but it doesn't have, the variation that I grew up in the '70s listening to, Hendrix and the Doors and the Allman Brothers and Eric Clapton. And all these rock gods and stuff, but it doesn't have that kind of sound when you record that way. You kind of lose the little happy accidents, or time changes, or being off key. Sometimes that stuff brings character.
That's very punk.
And if you clean it up, then you kind of lose all that. So what you guys being a punk type of band, what do you think about what I'm saying? Is that kind of why
I agree. I like what you're saying a lot. I think we definitely, while I like that, I think we definitely have to adapt to what the industry expects in Australia right now, which is definitely sometimes a bit of over editing. That being said, like we've definitely been coached a lot recently to kind of use DI guitars and just kind of use all those fake sounds afterwards, which is I've never been a fan of. I've always liked miking up an amp, but it's weird because everything in Australia seems to be moving to what's easy, and what's easy is plug in the guitar and just record with a fake sound kind of thing. So definitely that's what we kind of have to do now that we're home, kind of thing. But I'm aching to actually just kind of get into a studio once we've got the money one day and actually record proper amps, because that's, to me, is the best part about punk and how raw it is. So
you guys like going to, what type of amps do you like to use when you go to a studio? Do you like Orange or Marshall, or do you
I just love using my Fender DeVille, to be honest. It's actually more of a blues amp, but it's
oh, cool. Yeah, you like a blues? That's interesting. Some guys I've heard.
Yeah, I like what this amp is great for. Using pretty much any distortion pedal you want, and it just sounds. You can just get a great sound out of it, basically, and it's just kind of crisp. I like a crisp guitar sound. So that's definitely I like to take that everywhere. But I do like the sound of a Mesa Boogie as well. But I don't have one because I can't afford that.
Well, when you get to studio, you try to
exactly, and that's definitely something to look into in the future. But definitely what we also try to do is we try and work with producers who have a bit of a name for themselves. Recently, we recorded with a guy called Nick Sjogren, who's in a band called Thornhill, which are doing pretty well in Australia right now. So I guess we look more towards that too, because we're always thinking from a marketing point of view too, really. So it's definitely good to have a bit of a name attached. But what we're doing right now is recording ourselves, getting a bit better at that, because definitely in the future it'd be great to just do it ourselves, really.
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, I love using the different recording systems I use. I mean, I've been using Zooms for a while. I was thinking of moving up to maybe a Tascam 24, getting a bigger board, even like a Behringer Wing or something. But yeah, there's a lot of cool boards out there that you can get. And there's even some analog boards now. And since I have a lot of analog, since it's kind of like a situation with a guitar player, if you're using like Moogs and Profits, you really don't want to get the compression you get in the DAW. You want to kind of capture the sense, because they're kind of like, they're handmade and they're like guitars. Moogs from different years, like a 74 Moog versus a 79 Moog or a 68 Moog, they all sound different, like a guitar. And so when you capture them, if you put them into a system and make something antiseptic, it kind of takes away that. You're like, well, I don't want to do that. I mean, a lot of times I know guys that record on like old reel-to-reels with their Moog, mini Moogs and Prophet 5s and stuff, because it actually captures it better if you record on tape. So I've been moving toward
that will be cool.
Tape, just because. Yeah, and even like synthesis, we use pedals. We use guitar pedals on our synths to kind of add crunch to them. So we go and use digital delay pedals and phasers and all kinds of stuff. So what kind of pedals do you like as a guitar player? Do you want to give up your secret sauce?
I have a really cheap pedal actually, but it's pretty cool. It's called a Joyo. It cost me about like well, secondhand, $50, and it sounds really cool. I don't know, but and then I've just got a blues driver. So that's again, it's another blues sound. But I guess look, a lot of I guess I was drawn to that because a lot of punk now is probably a bit more influenced on the metal side of things. So it's really kind of like really crunchy, like almost tube screamer type sounds, whereas I like it a bit more vintage in a way. And it's just kind of sounds a bit more natural and less fuzzy. And I like to hear the notes playing in the guitar. So look, I'm still getting better at this. Like I said, we haven't been very serious about it for that long. So I'm still getting better at it. Like none of us are trained at all. We've never had lessons in anything. So, but I'm probably only in the last few years starting to get a real ear for like the sound I want. So the sound we have in a year might not even be it yet. You know what I mean? So
that's interesting. I had a guitar player I was working with, and he had a Fender Strat and he had a Les Paul. And he always used the Strat when he wanted to be more precise, and he actually wanted to hear like the details of his chords. Because like the Les Paul, like you can go real crunched out, but you don't have to be as precise on it, because it just like it sounds great no matter what you do. But on the Fender, you'll pick up your mistakes. So you like the Fender Strat and the Telecaster. What I found when I was working with guys with those is you had to be like a lot more precise. And it actually would, it would benefit you if you want to hear those chords ring out, like if you want something that sound like the Beatles, or you want it to sound like a little bit like a Rickenbacker, or like a 12-string or something. The Fender was like better at being more precise and detail oriented on the individual notes and chords. Where if you wanted to crunch out, the Les Paul was like the power tool. So what kind of guitars do you guys have?
Yeah, I've got a Cannatelli and an old guitar called a Schecter, which doesn't have strings on it, but that's more a metal guitar. But what were you gonna say?
I've got just a Fender Precision bass, pretty standard bass, and then I got a backup as a BC Rich as well. I actually prefer some of the tones that I get out of the BC Rich, but the thing's starting to fade away a little bit, and some of the electronics are fuzzing too much, so I don't use that one too often.
Oh, so you got fix the pickup.
Yeah, that's right.
Or something. It's like yeah. So on your bass, do you actually use pedals
yeah.
to expand?
I've got a Boss GT6B, it's called. So I use that, but mainly I use that for like one preset, and then I'll just use it for a tuner. I might add a bit of compression at times, and then I run that live usually through a PV head and a Behringer cab, which is kind of a different setup. There was this old punk band, I would call them. They were like Aussie punk in the late 90s, early 2000s, called Wasted. And it's actually their old amp. So it's over 20-year-old, this setup. And vintage. I just plug my gear in through that.
Well, that's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how bands are set up. You know, some bands have very elaborate like setups. Like if you ever seen a documentary on The Edge, I mean, he played real simple chord arrangements, but he runs through like this massive rack of sound altering gear. You know, he had like gigantic rack that has all these massive amount of effects, and he would just play very simple rhythms, and he gets his like unique sound by playing very simple patterns. But what the secret sauce is all these effects that were coming or hitting his sound that would make that kind of YouTube sound, which is interesting because he kind of just came out of creating his own sound, because he wasn't a guy that was like technically trained to play. And I always find it very interesting to talk to the artists that kind of self-taught, because they tend to come up with new ways of approaching their instrument, which is always interesting to hear the sound that comes out of people that come that way, or just passionate about what they want to do, and then they come up with like a unique sound, which you find in the indie world a lot. You know, it's I like talking to indie bands because they seem to be pushing things forward, which is why
sure. Yeah, we're pretty simple live. Like, I like to keep it simple. That's probably that punk aesthetic. I'm literally live. It's just distortion pedal, a flanger pedal, and a tuner. That's all I got.
Yeah, well, get back to the basics. You know, a lot of bands, it's cool to have like a clean sound and not overly produced. You know, it's good to have the kind of honesty. That's what I like about the punk aesthetic, is like there's this honesty about it and what you're doing. You kind of feel that people are the passion in the music. I think that's why people got drawn to Kurt Cobain after the whole like new wave and heavy metal era. People wanted to see, grunge kind of brought back the honesty in music. When you had Green Day and Nirvana and Pearl Jams of the world, they kind of like, okay, we get rid of the pretense of like the heavy metal bands like Motley Crue and Rat and all that. That's not bad, but people wanted something that was like coming from the heart, that was coming like honest. And like Eddie and Kurt and Green Day, they felt like this was coming from like a deeper place. It's not just some like manufactured kind of image, which it felt like it was.
I agree.
Is that what appeals to you about punk? That you like that rather than the heavy metal? Because as a guitar player, you can go into metal, you can go into heavy metal.
I
do that kind of thing.
I used to play like crazy shreddy heavy metal stuff, and after a while, I'm like, oh, I'm bored. I believe it or not, I got bored of playing that kind of things that guitarists don't usually get bored of playing, and I just started just playing chords and things I could easily sing to. I'm just like, oh, this is actually more fun, and it feels more real, and I can feel like I can express myself more than just kind of like being that guy who just stands there just trying to impress with his instrument. Really, I'm more about the storytelling kind of aspect of it, and I think the best way to do it is to keep it simple, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think singer-songwriters, like I've always been a big fan of like Dylan, Conor Oberst, and Springsteen, and it's always those guys have never been about like showboating. They don't. It's about the song.
Hey,
you know what I mean? Like in heavy metal, it's kind of about like being classically trained to be able to do those all, the runs, and you're kind of like Eddie Van Halen, or you're like the great, all these great like lead guitar players. But it's kind of like an ego thing versus like showing that you're like you're the best guitar player ever, you know, and you're just okay, that's cool, but you know where's the song, you know? It's I think punk kind of brings it back to like songwriting and just freeing yourself up to you know express yourself. So I think that instead of really trying to showboat, which I think, you know, that's my way.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned Connor Oberst.
So,
I just wondered if you know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously from Bright Eyes, I'm a bit of a Bright Eyes fan myself, but I wondered if you've heard his stuff with Phoebe Bridgers and Better Oblivion. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oblivion Society. Yeah.
That's cool, man. I was actually talking to John about Phoebe just in the last 24 hours. She's coming over with a band called The National, and they were going to do this tour, but it got cancelled because of the coronavirus. So then it got postponed, and I had these $400 tickets that I bought on a bootleg website, and I couldn't go to the show anymore because it was cancelled. But I couldn't redeem my tickets for the new show because they weren't in my name. So I've then gone and had to rebuy a ticket to go to this show. So I've spent like $550 just to see Phoebe, and she's only the support act. So I just sort of tweaked when you mentioned Connor before.
Yeah, I love Bright Eyes because they had that kind of, you know, he was always, you know, he kind of, you know, built up as a new age Dylan, but he's a little bit more than that. He's all over the map. He has like synthwave stuff. He's got like a, you know, jam band. Sounds like a little like Dylan. Sounds like, you know, new age stuff, and his lyric content is really cool. And he's willing to go and stretch himself and do all kinds of interesting things. You know, I just what he did with that Oblivion Society. That's really great stuff. I like any guy. You know, I'm cross genre. I listen to Johnny Cash. I listen to Sun Ra. I listen to Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix. I'm all over the map. I mean, I listen to like, you know, Tyler, the Creator. You know, anybody that does something really interesting, I think it's, you know, I'll get into it. It doesn't really matter what genre it is, but yeah, it's just interesting to see, you know, what people are doing with music. Because some people say, oh, you know, the album's dead, but then you go listen to something like Tyler's Igor. Well, that's an album. You know, it's actually a concept album, and so yeah, in some ways, like the album might be dead in some parts of the music world, but in some, you know, in hip hop, it seems like the album format is still valid. There's a lot of artists that do concepts. So what's your opinion about like albums versus singles and EPs? Are you guys kind of album oriented or single oriented?
I am definitely 100% album orientated. I've never even liked singles, but we're definitely quite limited, considering we don't have funding behind us, to our EPs, I think, and it's also kind of, the world's changing a lot, and I think EPs are more, especially for indie bands, they're more a thing because of the attention span of the modern day person. So definitely, I think people definitely say less is more, but I'd love to get the point of an album. But I think we're probably another EP before there. I have so many songs, and they're all like exactly what you said. Like I kind of rung a bell for me when you said concept albums, because that's exactly what I'm all about. I like it when all the songs match in style, but they also tell a story from start to finish. That's what our current EP does. If you actually really listen to the lyrics, it's kind of, it kind of goes on tells a bit of a story, and
Last World, right? Last World. You start with Last World, and then you end.
Exactly.
You have a song called Next World, and then you have Murphy's Law.
I mean, I guess we can talk about that. The album is it's very personal to me, but it starts from like probably the darkest time of my life, and slowly eases its way into the best, you know, part of my life, which is meeting my current partner. Her name's Murphy, so Murphy's Law is about her. So it kind of gets nicer and nicer as it goes along, and so it's kind of like, it starts off grim, saying, you know, last world, which makes you think end of the world, but it actually just means the world from before. So it's basically a way of saying, you know, life goes on and things get better in a way. So, but you know, no one would ever know unless I explained it like I did then.
So Green Day's concept albums must have inspired you to go with the album format then, because they were always into like
I'd love to get to there one day. The 9-minute songs.
But
Yeah, well, I kind of grew up. I grew up
Yeah.
with like Tommy. You know, the Who. They're the first band to do the rock opera, and Tommy was like, and I was like totally enthralled with Tommy. I had it on vinyl. I was listening to it over and over till I wore it out. And then you know, they came out with Quadrophenia, which was like
Yeah,
their magnus opus. I mean, like that is one of the greatest concept albums. And the Who, if people I don't know if they're like the first punk rockers. Really, they weren't like Zepp. They weren't like Hendrix. They weren't like Cream. They had like a punk aesthetic. I mean, they blew up their instruments. You know, Moon used to take like powerful firecrackers and blow up his drum set. You know, at end every gig, and they just had this sound. If you ever seen them live, and they're like one of the loudest bands ever, and they just had this aesthetic that wasn't like a normal rock outfit. And even though they had these concepts, they approached the stage like everybody was playing individually different parts, and it was very chaotic. And the only thing that kind of kept it together was like T. Townsend acted like the rhythm section, while Moon would just solo through the whole song. Entwistle would solo through the whole song. And so, you know, only like Daltrey, he was kind of going off and swinging his microphone, but they really don't sound like any other rock band. And they do have this punk aesthetic that always like inspired me. But their concept albums, you know, I started there and then I got into Floyd concept albums and Pink Floyd. But yeah, I've always been drawn to bands that would sit. You know, I grew up on vinyl, so you had to sit. You know, when you picked up your vinyl, like you didn't just play one song and walk out the room. You would just sit, you know, in the room. In the 70s, I grew up in the 70s. You know, you'd be in there with your friends.
Yeah,
back some weed or something. You gotta listen. You listen to the whole thing. You know, we'd sit there and listen to Pink Floyd all the way through. You know, listen to the Doors all the way through. That's
yeah. We really take music for granted now, don't we? I remember I used to feel much. I had this much more euphoric feeling back when not at your level, but back when I just had a disc in a Walkman, and it was just something physical that you held and you had to buy, and you owned it. And now it's just everywhere. It's just like in the cloud, and it definitely doesn't have that kind of meaning. And it's the same reason we can't really go around doing massive long songs anymore, because it's attention spans. Like, it's such a different world. I wish we were up and running back in the day, where kind of it was, music had a bit more meaning. But even films now these days, it's less meaning to it now.
Yeah, but
it's interesting because like so you guys have felt like, well, punk tends to have like songs that are under 3 minutes. Like a lot of your songs are like minutes.
Yeah, we've just written a 40-second one, so
you know, you're yeah. But that's interesting because like the world today is forcing, you know, a lot of bands to be in that under 3 minute world of the song, and then everybody's playlisted. And so you've got to create like your best effort to, you know, for your singles. But it's interesting, like in my world, I'm a progressive electronic, you know, band. They kind of inspired by bands like Yes and Pink Floyd. So I still write like 9 minute, 8 minute, 10-minute songs. And the audience I have is like a lot smaller than what it could be. But there are still people that want that. And so I kind of cater to the people that want that. And it still wants to see bands that do that, but you're only going to get so big doing that. That's why I do the podcast. but I do what I want to do. But I realized, you know, I started to make some shorter songs. I'm like, but when you're a progressive artist and then you want to do these big concepts, like it's hard to fit something that's really a 10-minute idea into 3 minutes. You know, it doesn't work. So, like, we've been thinking, a lot of artists I've talked to is like, okay, well, I'll take a 9-minute song and then break it up and then make it so you could, like, you know, listen to individual parts as separate songs. That's how you can try to get it out there. But
it's funny that you brought up Green Day before.
So have you guys thought of...
It's funny that you brought up Green Day before with when you were talking about you know, albums that influenced you and concept albums, like, you know, throwing back to your own point in time. But actually, when we mentioned our influences earlier, I think I might have mentioned Green Day quickly, but something that John and I are both were in love with from even before we were writing music was Green Day's Warning album, and we sort of went back from there to Nimrod and Dookie and sort of moved along with Green Day. But what was really cool about that is we weren't even writing music there. We didn't even play instruments, but we both had this passion for this band that were just totally new and cool to us. But John's dad loved Green Day and he showed us Green Day. And so from there, we actually started moving into heavier music. And although Green Day probably don't form too much of the basis for our current sound, they definitely shaped our ears early and moved us into where we are now. So really cool.
100%.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Green Day kind of did bring a whole new generation of guys into punk. You know, I hear a lot of the bands I talk to that are more coming from a punk or you know, kind of grunge aesthetic, always like name check Green Day, where, you know, in my day, when you talk punk, you always know what Sex Pistols, you know, Clash, you know, people would say, you know, Joy Division, stuff like that. Bauhaus, you know, the people would, you know, but it's like, I'm dealing with a whole nother generation. I'm in my 50s, so like punk to me is like the Ramones. You know, that's kind of where I came from. You know, the early Talking Heads when they were actually a punk band, because they actually started off being punk. But yeah, CBGBs, that was kind of like the big spot in New York where all the punk.
Yeah, I know the one.
Yeah, that's kind of like where I like. Oh yeah, that's
it's,
like
Blondie. Yeah. I think Blondie was through there.
Yeah, Blondie. Yeah, when she was a punk band before she became a new wave band. You know, that's the whole thing. But that's always interesting. I've always liked, you know, bands like, I don't know, you get into Lou Reed and the Velvets, but the Velvet Underground was always a big influence for me, just because they had this kind of raw sound. I don't know if you ever got into them, but they're very experimental, very raw. And Lou Reed's early stuff, it's just got a punk aesthetic, but he didn't really care. You know, he just said whatever he wanted to say, and it has that kind of punk nature to it. So have you thought about collaborating with artists from other genres, like hip hop or jazz or, you know, heavy metal, classical, whatever genre?
Well, you answer that one, Chris.
Mixing genres.
I think, John's got some ideas mainly for female vocalists at the moment. So he's got one song that he's got in his head. And I think we do have someone in mind. They're not currently releasing their own music, but they're working on it. And we've heard some of their stuff, and it's pretty exciting. But yeah, this chick, she does music anywhere from your sort of really heavy sort of industrial metal stuff back to just some sort of post-hardcore sort of lighter metal sounds. But what like to bring her into one of our upcoming songs, which is the idea, it's probably gonna be a little bit interesting, but we find that her voice might sort of suit our tone. But yeah, I can't really say too much about what she does and her style of music yet, because none of it's launched. But in the concept stuff that I've heard from her, it's really cool, and she's got this very unique and recognizable voice. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I always like, you know, the Velvets had like Velvet Underground and Nico, like their first album. They had a female like model, and she had this like kind of drone sound. It was really interesting, and I always like bands like Juliana Hatfield. You know, and she had the Blake Babies. You know, she led that band back in the 90s. Liz Phair. You know, if you go back to the Runaways with Joan Jett, Lita Ford, they was kind of early female punk band. That kind of aesthetic is cool. So they kind of change the nature of your band, make it have like this. You know, would it just be features, or would you actually have her be more involved in your next material? Would it be like a lot
just
of
one at this stage? Because definitely we've quite kind of our mantra right now is that we just want to remain as a 3-piece and keep it simple. Like people even mention, oh, you know, why don't you get another guitarist, or why don't you just jump onto vocals or kind of thing? And we're just like, we just want to keep it simple: guitar, bass, drums, vocalist, backing vocalist, and that's it. Just 3 guys. But that's why we thought it would be nice to explore other sounds anyway, because you never know. And we're definitely open to any genre really jumping in. Really, I think why we've just kind of chosen her for now is we're definitely we're definitely in with the kind of hardcore and metal scene in Victoria, in Melbourne, and so we're kind of a bit of a connection between the pop punk and the hardcore scene. We're kind of in between. We're kind of like this dark pop punk sound, so we fit in with either side, and so we definitely find the more people we meet, the more we want to collaborate. So that's where that's come from.
So have you thought of doing anything with like keyboards or modular synths or analog to kind of bring like an industrial
I definitely like the industrial sound. So I'm definitely thinking about that for probably not this EP. Since this EP, we're probably just trying something a bit more pop-ish. Mm-hmm. So considering the current time and climate, but probably after this, we're definitely going to try a bit like go back to our roots a bit and bit more of a darker feel. And I am definitely keen to experiment a little bit more with that one. So I'd imagine there'll be, if you listen to that album that I mentioned before, the self-titled Blink-182 album, it was quite industrial influence, and there's a lot of synths and kind of like there's a lot of, if you just have a listen, you'll see what I mean. Like there's a lot of songs really experiment with those kind of sounds.
Yeah, I've been really into like Brian Eno and a lot of German Berlin industrial synthesis. Going back to bands like Kraftwerk and Brian Eno and Bowie, they tried to push the experimental electronic, and experimental electronic is still out there with the modular synths, the Euroracks, Moogs, Prophet synths. They allow you to do something that's not just melodic, not just kind of new wave. It's more like Trent Reznor. It's more like aggressive. You can be very aggressive. You can have feedback coming out of your synth. You can have distorted, really
that's cool
guitar-like sounds. Plus, like you can use the really industrial beats off of like analog drum machines. I got like a Moog analog drum machine that sounds like it sounds like tribal drums. They actually can do very, very heavy drums that are not like an 808. It's not like a 909. It's an analog machine. It doesn't even have MIDI. It just makes these really crazy sounds, and you can do stuff with it that you can't do with any kind of digital drum machine. And it's part of that whole sound. A lot of that stuff, comes from analog rather than digital. But
cool.
I'm a big analog guy, and I'm a big proponent of not going totally digital and samples and stuff. I'm kind of like anti-sample, but so with the coronavirus and the crisis, as a band, how you guys have adapted, because you already have like a social media influence, but in terms of how are you thinking, like future thinking, what you have to do in this kind of new age of social distancing? How, for bands, that's a really big problem, because a lot of what we do in the industry today is like bands make the money from doing shows, from getting close to their audience, and building that audience by being like in clubs. So like in this new age, if we're stuck in this until they get a cure, until they have antivirals, until they have a vaccine.
We're lucky that we're not motivated by the money side of things, and I don't think we've ever earned a cent from the gigs we've done. And if we have, we've kind of forgotten about it. They said, hey, we're supposed to pay you, come get your money. I'm like, I can't be bothered. It's fine. We just like playing the gig. So it's like we're perfectly comfortable with that. Any payment's just bonus. One way bands can make money still is obviously merch, and we've gotten to the merch game recently. That's doing pretty well. And you can keep that going through social media if you're quite savvy with definitely making videos, or like or if you're good with Photoshop kind of thing, you can make content. And these days it is like all about content, and that's kind of another one of our mantras too, is like if we just keep on making content and just paint ourselves as fun, because we are fun, we like to have fun, and I think people resonate with that a bit. So if we're making content that's got a bit of a positive outlook to it during this time, people kind of like have a bit of engagement to it. And so if I had advice for people out there is, if you need to make money from music, I'd keep making music during this time and then try and sell merch maybe. But like I said, we don't see it as a business in terms of money. We just see it as this kind of business in terms of just getting music out there. So that's our kind of goal. So we feel we can do that still without having to play live shows.
That's cool. I'm a bedroom artist primarily. I played in New York and Boston periodically.
Nice.
I do live shows. I do a lot of live streaming on Twitch and Facebook Live, and I pretty much record every day. I mean, I record all the time, and I put content out, all the time. I was lucky enough. I finally got on a label last year. I got on 2 labels with 2 distribution contracts. And what's really cool this year, I don't know if you guys know, but like SoundCloud artists that are like in their premier tier, they finally opened up distribution to all the streaming services for anybody that's on the premier level. And so you can get your stuff published, through SoundCloud. If you're on their premier monetization, it's not that expensive. And I've been a SoundCloud artist since like 2008. And I was trying to get into their distribution system. And because of the coronavirus, in the last 2 weeks, they suddenly made it available that you can actually, publish on Spotify and iTunes and all this stuff. And they just publish it. And and then you end up getting almost all the royalties. And then they could put you on their playlist. And they've added, because of the coronavirus, they've added a donate button on the profile of all the artists. And so now you can actually get donations. Spotify is getting ready to do that too, because they realize artists are having trouble. So it's interesting. This whole crisis has brought in, now donations are now possible for a lot of artists, between SoundCloud and Spotify and even iTunes is getting ready to do that. So a lot of companies I heard Amazon's getting ready to do it. So there's a lot of ability now to actually get new streams coming in. And the kind of artist I am, you can do sync licensing because I'm a keyboardist, I'm a synthesizer player. So I could do sync licensing, which means I could do little 30-minute things for like video games and commercials and TV, because I can create like strings and whatever. I can do any kind of sound. So if I get a pitch that says we need this 30-second thing, I can make money doing that. And nobody even knows it's the ghost. I just do it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's all kinds of alternative ways of getting out there. Sync licensing is a big thing. And even if you're not like a synth player that can do a jingle or something, sometimes these sync licenses are looking for all.
Yeah.
So that's another alternative. Not if you want to just make money, but it's another way.
It's funny that John brought up our band coach earlier. Actually, his name's Steve. We call him Coach, but he was on a podcast recently that I had to listen to in the last 24 hours, and they focused a fair bit on this, like the future of music and what it might look like, and what type of artists are going to struggle and what type of artists are going to come out on top. And Steve was ultimately saying that anytime we go through a cycle of change, or like a post-war, or in this case, it's going to be post-corona, who's going to come out on top? And he's saying in the past, it's been people with money or the entrepreneurs. So there's like your two variations there. And I suppose for bands like us that don't have money, but still want to push forward with music, it's just going to be about adapting and really coming up with the best ideas possible. And think something like what we did with that Green Day cover, where we did the "Wake Me Up When Corona Ends." Just having the ability to get on the same level in the headspace of where people are at and push out that sort of content. I think that shows that it's really the people that can be malleable or change with the times that are going to push through, and the entrepreneurial mindset, really. So fortunately, we're lucky enough to have John, like he says, in video production, so he can put together some awesome social media runs for us, and he can put together whole video concepts for us to film from home, and we've already got a fair few ideas going. So really, it's just going to be about not just becoming stagnant and not letting this situation beat you down. So.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of invites. They're out there for indie artists to do like live cast. There's a bunch of because all the festivals got canceled, right? There's a bunch of organizations trying to put together indie and bedroom artist live streams from their home studios, and they're actually setting up like little online festivals where bands are able to jump on and do like a 20-minute set from their own home studio. And it's part of like a full like festival. They might run like 6-8 hours of doing nothing but indie bands playing from their wherever they're playing from. And a lot of times it's from their home studio or from wherever, the garage or the basement. But there's a bunch of these. I've signed up for like 3 of them in the last 2 weeks, and they're going out looking for artists. So that's another way in this kind of Corona thing, and hopefully it will continue, after the venues open up. But I think that gives a lot of bands another way to get out there. So there are people who are already thinking out the box.
Yeah, I was actually watching what was called like a live in your lounge concert with a local band called Hands Like Houses, and I was just blown away that within about 7 days of the country going into lockdown, they'd already put together this whole home concert, and it was like, I don't know where they were, but it was fantastic. They had lighting, they had full sound engineering and everything going on, and it was streamed across YouTube and Facebook at the same time. And I just thought, obviously in their situation, maybe they had the sort of the gigging history and the connections and the money behind them, but it's pretty interesting that there are going to be bands that don't have that, that are going to have to try and find these avenues. And like you say, these streaming servers that are putting it out to the smaller bands in their own lounge rooms. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, not that I'm a big pusher of I use Roland products, but for a couple of years I've been using a Roland Go mixer, which allows me to use my iPhone on a tripod to film from my home studio. And it's not super expensive, and it allows you to use your iPhone and link right to your mixing board and get a really good quality signal. And it's not crazy expensive. So I've been doing that before Corona. I've been doing that for like 2 years. I've been doing Facebook Lives and Twitches and stuff like that. And now everybody's doing it, but it's like that those tools were out there, but people were, if you're a live band, like, well, I'm going to do it, I'm just going to go to the gig. But now you can think about, finding cheaper lighting systems and, ways to get your sound over the net that give you good quality. And it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars. It doesn't have to be like hundreds of dollars. There are devices out there that if you check it out, you can get out there relatively cheaply and get your sound and your vision to a wider audience than what you can even do in a gig. I've had some online gigs where I've hit
that's awesome.
5,000 people, which is good for me. If I do a live gig in New York, I might get 300 people, like in Fat Baby in Manhattan, and do 5,000 on Facebook Live. So I actually hit more people doing my live Facebook Live than I do physically going to Manhattan and going to a small club. I would say I like playing in Manhattan, at Fat Baby when I'm like 10 feet away from the audience. There's a vibe that you get from playing with getting an audience kind of feeding you back. They're good vibes and stuff. That's hard to replace on the net, but we'll just have to
until we can get them all streaming themselves onto our laptop and we can see them in return.
And so if somebody breaks a feedback loop, maybe with like VR or something, that where you can like feel the audience, and then you get the feedback and it feels
it's certainly prompting some pretty awesome ideas. John seems to have just dropped off. He's sent me a message, so I think he's going to try and reconnect, but he might not get back on.
He's done. Okay, we might be getting to the end, but so you guys are already moving toward like social media. You've got ability to do video production. There are other things, and like you're talking about merch. Do you guys do your own?
Actually, interestingly enough, the artist that did our first, band logo and promotional sort of piece. Her name's Selena Snow, and she's a tattooist, and she's actually going to help us work on the next album cover as well. But we started working with her by fluke. She found our music on Instagram, or no, she contacted us on Instagram after she found us through some national radio that we got played on. She's a friend of the radio hosts, and she messaged us and was like, "Oh, your stuff's really cool. Really enjoy it. Just wanted to just say hey." And we're like, sweet. And then I noticed, like, I went on her page and noticed she was a tattooist, and I was like, oh, sweet, that's cool. And then we were just trying to come up, how do we get someone to do our art for, not cost us too much money? And we ended up just getting in touch with her and realizing, she's doing graphic art to build her tattoos. So why don't we get her to do our logo? And so she put that together. But she's also the same girl that is doing her own music too. So it sort of links back to that, where she's doing the heavy industrial metal sound and the post-hardcore sort of sounds. And I found all of that just by her reaching out to us. So really interesting that not only has she done some artwork for us, but she's also going to be featuring on one of our upcoming songs, which just very very interesting to link all of that up. It was someone that just contacted us raw out of nowhere to tell us they liked our music, has suddenly become an artist for us, and also going to be an artist with us, for a song. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the, Instagram is the primary source of all my interviews for this program. Most of the artists I interview get in touch with me. Either they say they like a podcast I did with a band, and they give me a thumbs up for the interview I did with a band, like the one I'm doing with you guys. And then I say, oh, you're a band, would you want to come on? And that's how most of the time I get my booking. I don't even have to talk to their agents. I talk to the bands directly. It's all through Instagram, because they like something I did or something I posted, and then I go back and forth, and then I get them on. And like you, I met an artist that did a record cover for me back in 2017 on turnabello.com. He does like kind of this really black and white psychedelic artwork, but it's all black and white. And he did the cover of one of my albums because he liked what I was doing on the net. And then he was like in Germany, and I never met him. We just contacted each other through like Skype. And then he ended up doing a bunch of artwork for me for a record cover. And we just had this online connection. And, we're still in contact. We're supposed to be working. We're trying to work on another project. But it's interesting. A lot of the people I've talked to, like other artists I've actually worked with, it's all through Instagram, which I think seems to be the most musician friendly social media platform out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Instagram's it's been really cool for us. Like, I think Instagram is where we're probably generating our most organic following, and where a lot of our activity is built through. So, you have your you can upload your photos and then automatically share them to your other social medias. You can upload your stories and share them across. So I find Instagram actually to be a really great tool as not only a way of contacting people, but also it's a great sort of origin to put your content on, to branch out from too. Something I've noticed just in the last few months is from making just general content, that we have like a bit of a band advisor who helps us out with how she would recommend we put our content across, and we do these campaigns with her when we have releases. And she says you got to be really conscious of what you're putting on your social media platforms and that. And it's something that in the past we would just always be joking and always put stupid stuff up. But in actually starting to take it a little bit more seriously, we're starting to get serious responses. And we've had people reach out to us, say, hey, like your music. Do you want to come on our podcast like this? Or do you want to be on our Spotify playlist, this sort of thing? I'm like, hey, that's awesome. Just reaching people organically through using tools, probably the way they're designed to be used now. But it's something that, Instagram, I always thought was just a photo sharing app. And then suddenly it's turned into a very core component of what we do as a band.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that they added the ability to do like 10-minute video, which I've been using to a big effect. And then they've got integration with multiple platforms. Like,
Yep.
you know, like I said, Anchor FM is part of Spotify. And then what happens is we can actually take the Spotify version of this podcast can be a highlight on Instagram that automatically, when you click on it, it goes to the Spotify version of the podcast. So when we publish this, we will make a highlight on our site. And when you click it, it will go right to the Spotify podcast of this program. So it allows you to actually promote it on Instagram, and you don't have to pay for it. I mean, it allows you to do a link as a highlight, which is pretty cool. And that's very musician friendly. You know, even SoundCloud has the ability to create highlights in Instagram, which again is another musician tool. So that seems like they're very musician friendly, and I've been using it for a while because of the integration. It just allows you to do a lot of promotion. It's increased the number of people that listen to our podcast, and gets me a wider audience. It allows me to talk to international artists like yourself, which, you know, I just don't talk to U.S. artists. I talk to, you know, bands in Berlin, bands in Japan, in the Netherlands. You know, it's just opens up
it does. And
world.
we had a lady on
really
Instagram
cool.
contact us from, I believe she was in the UK. Alex Plays Punk, it's called, ALYX. And so she was speaking to us through Instagram and put our song on her show. And we also, you know, through these same sort of methods in social media, we hit a radio show that was broadcast across like 5 or 6 different countries, but across Europe, US, Canada, things like that. And it's just crazy that you can reach an international audience from your lounge room, like sitting in front of your computer, and just in so many various ways. But yeah, these social media platforms, I think Instagram might be owned by Facebook or vice versa, but they're kind of shared together. So Instagram is huge, and it's enabled us to branch out in many different ways.
I'm back.
Hey.
Okay. Well, you're back, but I guess we're getting ready. We're getting ready to close out. But yeah, I appreciate you guys being on the show, Drastic Park. We've been talking to you guys for over an hour. It's really cool, and that's one of the cool things about this platform. We don't really care about time limitations, but I actually have like another appointment. But we will be publishing this tonight. It goes out on Anchor FM and 11 or 10 other platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Google, Radio Public, Overcast, many more. And like I said, we have a highlight integration with Spotify for this podcast that will link on Instagram, and we'll be pushing that out on all of our social media, including my alter ego, Josephine Electric page. And so we will be pushing this out in the next hour, and we will include in the your hyperlinks that you gave us on the podcast, so we can actually do that. And so we look forward to talking to you guys when you have any additional projects. We talked to bands multiple times. We've had, you know, a lot of bands on 2-3 times if they have things to talk about. So we'll invite open invitation. If you have another project in 2020
Awesome.
or 2021, you can come on the show again.
So sorry, man, I didn't catch your name at the start because I came in late. I didn't catch your name.
Yeah. My name is Keith Gittins Jones. That's my legal name.
Great.
Awesome.
My artist name is Fam Electric.
Well, awesome.
My alter ego is Josephine Electric. She's a creation of a synthesizer called a VT4 vocoder from Roland, which I used in real time to do her
awesome.
female voice.
All right, thanks heaps, Keith. Appreciate it, man. It's been really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate. Awesome, thanks.
All right. Catch you.